We are live. Good to see you today, my EOS podcast friends. I have a special show for you today. We've got Kayvan, and he is an attorney turned filmmaker. He has kind of a legendary background in the independent film market, international success, all kinds of interesting stuff. If you want to look into it in the IMDb. Now you are the co-chairman of the International Committee for the Producers Guild of America. What we have today, my EOS friends, we're going to talk about blockchain, how it fits into the film industry, producers, distribution, all of that, which the EOS people, we don't know that much about. So this is going to be a journey into the unknown, and it's going to be the most interesting podcast in the history of the EOS podcast. So,
well, good morning. Good morning, everyone on the EOS world. I'm so thrilled to be on my very first podcast. This is my first time I'm doing this, and I'm very grateful for the fact that Brandon is giving me this opportunity. My name is Kayvan Mashayekh. I'm the co-chairman of the International Committee of Producers Guild of America, and we have just started this initiative back in the fall of last year at the London Film Festival, where this discussion about blockchain and how it applies in the film industry was born out of the frustrations that I had when, as a content creator, you didn't know how to quite monetize the content that you're creating and how you're able to realize that downstream once you get your film out there. Now, this discussion is going to be very, very comprehensive, and at some points maybe a little bit too, how do I say, 101 for some of you, because you're so technologically adept at this subject matter, which I'm not. So I'm trying to merge these two worlds where people who are neophytes and are not understanding very much about the technology gain a foothold in how to merge these two worlds between people who don't understand this technology and people who have real problems in trying to get their content out there and have it monetized, and merge them together. And I've been fortunate enough to have some blockchain companies that are out there in helping us realize these issues and bring it to the forefront of the discussion. So with that, I'm going to let Brandon begin the discussion.
All right. Well, what we can do is I'd like to walk through the process of getting a film made, because I think that as a lot of people state pretty often, blockchain doesn't just solve everything magically. How this will happen is in pieces, and small parts of the industry will be changed and adjusted until someday the blockchain is just doing magical things behind the doors and no one knows what's going on, like the internet. It just works. You just type stuff in, it tells you. So let's start with kind of how a film is, I guess. What would the beginning be of a film? Would it be raising money, or where's the film process start? Or
the film process, the beginning of the film process always starts with one thing. It's the IP, the intellectual property. Without the intellectual property, without the story, without the rights to that story, you can't have anything launched, because it requires you to go out there and find it from whatever source you can, and then have that obtaining the rights to that IP sets off a chain where you can start the development process. And in the traditional way, the development process consists of you coming up with the underlying literary property, which you can take that story and turn it into a screenplay, or if it's a short story, or if it's something that you've seen in a video clip or something, anything that you can take and turn it into a story and turn it into a screenplay. So that screenplay becomes your IP. Once that IP is created, then you go through the process of packaging. And packaging is when you get a director or a famous actor involved, and from that point you can start the process of financing. And financing the picture can come through different sources. It can come through private equity. It could come through soft money, like, for example, if you're shooting it in a certain state, you have a certain level of spend in that state, you can get tax credits or tax benefits. Or if you're doing something in Europe, you can avail yourself of the benefits of co-production treaties and get co-production financing and putting it all together. Now, this process is not something that you do individually. It's something where you put a team of people together, and eventually you move the needle forward. But the person who does that is the producer. And what is the producer? The producer is a person, technically speaking, that's a person who's financially and administratively responsible for a motion picture or a film or a television show, whatever, from the development stage all the way through the production stage to the post-production stage to the distribution and eventually, getting it out there for the world to see. Now, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Sorry if it was a little bit too long of an explanation.
No, that's perfect. I think I mean, there two things popped up to me there where you can let me know how blockchain fits in, but intellectual property is kind of an obvious one. It seems like the blockchain gives you this opportunity to set some sort of standard for global intellectual property. Is that something that you run into where maybe your intellectual property is protected in some countries but not others, or is there some sort of recognized international standard for that, or what's that scene look like?
Well, your IP is basically, it's something that you have it copyrighted. Intellectual property is something that's going to be protected by copyright law, and that's something that's universally recognized. Because whenever that eventual IP is produced, you got to go through this huge process, legal process, where the chain of title of that IP becomes mission critical. And without that proper chain of title showing that you own that IP or you have rights to it or somehow, you are not able to exploit a dime of that revenue without, having legal trouble come your way, which you don't want. So, I mean, the process, once again, is something that is very, very, standardized in certain ways, but as we move into this new world where technology and film are starting to marry themselves together, certain aspects of it may be ripe for this whole decentralized ledger that blockchain is, which is very, very fascinating. Like, for example, you have a question? Sorry, you seem like you had a...
No.
Well, for example, when it comes to creating smart contracts, which I'm sure you're familiar with, you can find a way to. All that is just basically you take a QR code, you could code something and create that digital asset, and that digital asset can be exploited. So through the blockchain technology that we have, so there's a lot of ways you can simplify things where. If you're trying to realize the money for film, for example, and you got to go through the waterfall process, and that doesn't have to go through a centralized person determining how much money is collected, who collects it. One person collects it, and one person has to account for it, and eventually give out the money to all the people who are supposed to be, have a right to that income. That could be digitized and created through the blockchain very easily. This is just one example.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's probably in the future some sort of use for the blockchain as far as recording intellectual property in a place where everyone can, where the blockchain is just a simple tool where it can be on an immutable ledger where it can be stored and looked up really easily. So I think a probably more interesting application is the financing angle. What kind of thought have you put into, or what do you think about the almost like a GoFundMe type of or like ICO type of raises for bigger films where people can put $5,000 into a film from anywhere around the globe?
That's a very interesting question, because I think that's something that currently in this whole atmosphere where I'm just telling you from the perspective I'm seeing it. So this is strictly my opinion only, and my opinion only is because of this whole crypto. How do I put it? This decay in trust in the whole cryptocurrency world that's happening.
Mania, yeah.
Mania that's happened.
Yeah.
And the valuation, for example, of Bitcoin, it's freaked a lot of people out.
Mm-hmm.
And many people in the film industry are shying away from things that have anything with the world of cryptocurrencies, and blockchain is sometimes associated with that, even though the technology has nothing to do exactly with cryptocurrencies. I mean, cryptocurrencies were created through the blockchain, but whenever you say blockchain, people immediately start thinking, oh, crypto, and I don't want to deal with it, because they freak out about it. So because it has this kind of a negative cloud over it right now, raising money through an ICO for a film has become very, very challenging. Now, there are lots of companies out there that are trying to go around this issue, because at the end of the day, what they're trying to push is the value, the positive value of the technology, because the technology is real. The technology is valid. And if you're able to utilize bits and pieces of it and put it on a platform, you can be very, very successful in maximizing the efficiency of your project. And let me just give you an example. I mean, we were talking about just a minute ago, for example, recoupment schedule. That's a very simple way to create a smart contract where, if you're a person that created content and you get a distributor to distribute the film, you want to make sure that when it's out there, there is, you know where you are in line to receive the money. Well, this can be easily coded and transparent. It doesn't have to be something that's so complicated, but it can be done. Now, in order for it to be done, in order for this type of technology to really, really work, everybody from the producer to the distributor to the exhibitor, everybody's got to come on board this platform in order for it to be a viable solution, the end-all be-all thing. And I got to tell you something very interesting, because I recently spoke with an investor in this world, who's basically like watching these 6 segments that I'm doing. Basically, I'm doing these 6 segments around the world. We started in London. Next week, I'm going to be doing this in Berlin, and then Tribeca, and then Cannes, and then Venice and Toronto. So each time we're doing this, we're focusing on one aspect of the blockchain technology and how it can be applied in the film business. This next talk that I'm doing is going to be on monetization and fragmented landscape. How do you monetize? So that's why I'm trying to focus on this part. And when I was talking to this investor, he told me, he goes, what's happening here right now is he used the hockey stick example for me. Everybody's on the bottom part of that hockey stick, and we're trying to figure out how this technology is going to be not only relevant, but something that's going to be utilizable. At some point, the moment everybody gets on that platform and understands the value and are able to figure out the kinks, the hockey stick, you will hit that up curve, that parabolic up curve where you can hold and that's when it becomes a reality. Mm-hmm. For now, we're in the embryonic stages. We're in the beginning stages. It's kind of like when a car was created at first. It was the hand-cranked car, and people kind of looked at it and said, what is this kind of weird thing? And, how does this work? But there's still a lot to be learned about this that a lot of people are unsure about, and how it applies in that specific field, in that world.
Yeah, we're definitely kind of from the beginning of your statement there, we're definitely in like the early internet era here, like the pets.com website with nothing on it era, where a bunch of websites popped up. None of them did anything. A bunch of people made a lot of money. And then everyone was scared of the internet for a few years. And the few people that stuck around and built like Amazon and companies like that, it took them a long time, but eventually the internet came to fruition. We're definitely in that bottom of the hockey stick there. So it's a interesting time. Yeah.
And also the thing is, the key 3 things that, I keep on, harping on is, is this technology that's being used, is it adaptable? Is it adoptable? And is it scalable? Now, the scalability issue is very relevant to what you're doing, Brandon, because EOS apparently is from my understanding, and I'm sure, your EOS world of techie, superior-minded people can explain this to me, it can handle a larger number of transactions than an Ethereum. Am I correct? I mean, if once you get to an issue where a lot of people come on there, you want to be using a system that uses EOS and not Ethereum. Am I correct? Because the scalability.
At this point, the proof of stake system that EOS has, delegated proof of stake system, has been more scalable. It's got a lot more dApps being built on it, just because of the fact that you can do transactions quickly, and you don't have to sit there and wait a minute or 2 minutes. People don't, no, in this day and age, no one wants to wait. So it currently is proving to be the most scalable. Absolutely. So.
And in my world, any solution that you come up with regarding this has to deal with a trade-off between 3 things, not just the scalability issue, but also the security issue and also the decentralization. So if you're able to, create this platform where everybody's going to come on it, are you giving one thing up for another? Are you giving up scalability for more security or more decentralization? Because it moves all up in levels. So you can't maximize all three of them, and you have some kind of trade-off in order for this platform to really engage and really move forward.
Yeah, there's actually a pretty good debate about that trade-off as far as you can't maximize all of them, but the argument for DPoS is that it's close to as secure as a proof of work chain because of the way that mining pools basically come together. Giant conglomerates of mining pools own large portions of the chain. So whereas people look at EOS like a governed chain, like people are just putting out votes and they're deciding what to do. And what if those people were to collude and they all put their votes in one place to make a decision? But you can also look at a proof of work chain like Bitcoin as people voting with their hashing power. They're not voting outright, but they are voting with what they're doing with their money. And those are kind of have come together into big voting pools where they can, in the same way, come together, manipulate the direction of the chain. So it's debatable whether it is less secure or not at this point. So that's not the trade-off there is not as black and white as people like to make it. Obviously the trade-offs, they're happening, but it's not like you're trading security on EOS. There's EOS is possibly equally as secure. So and the thing about what we're talking about here is kind of the next stage of adoption. And honestly, us crypto heads have a lot of debates over security issues and integrity of the chain and worst case scenarios. But once you get the people who just want to use blockchain on the back end, they don't necessarily care about that. They're not going to choose for a small trade-off. They're not going to make a choice where the user interface is much better or the user experience is much better. They're just going to go with a good user experience. Right now you have people that use Facebook because because it's easy to use, not because they're worried about security or their privacy. So that's kind of an interesting take as well. I don't think that the adoption community is going to necessarily care there.
Mm-hmm. Of course, there's a lot of other uses for this in my industry. For example, to tackle piracy. I mean, that's like one of the things that distributors in the traditional model, going back to our initial discussion when you asked me about how it works, when a distributor distributes your film, they will utilize, you usually have to go, as a producer, you got to go through a sales agent. You have the territorial rights for your film that's sold in several different territories around the world, so they can be distributed around the countries that have the rights to distribute your content. And for that, you may have about 4 or 5 countries that have the distribution rights to your film and will account for it, and they'll pay out according to their schedule, whatever. But once you get on this platform, the reason why it's important is you can control that. You can control who sees your film when and for how much. So and you don't necessarily cut out the middleman, but you make it a fairer process where you're able to be in a position where you can realize your revenue much quicker than going through this whole process where it's got to be accounted for. You send the invoice in about 12 to 18 months. The guy will maybe give you the money based on whatever they say they received. So instead of it going from one to one central source, this decentralized process is something that could be very, very useful for filmmakers who don't have the access of going through a traditional distributor to get their content out there. Because you have to be able to convince a distributor that, hey, my film is good enough for an audience that you think will be able to buy into it. But why not? Why shouldn't I be able to put it out there and see who's going to be able to see it when they want to see it, and be able to realize my revenue then through this system, through this technology?
Yeah, that is a heavy bottleneck. So the way I understand it is that, okay, I have a film that's packaged and ready to go. Now I need to go to each different part of the globe and negotiate some sort of distribution contract with them. Exactly. And that's just a heavy process. And a lot of it comes down to, I'm going to go for the bigger markets where I'm going to get more bang for my buck, but that market that maybe only is going to have 1,000 views then I'm going to skip it because it's not worth my time. So what happens with that community that was only going to have 1,000 views, but they still want to watch the show? Where do they watch it?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is where piracy happens. Piracy happens because if you don't have access to the material, you want to see it, you find a way to do it. And as a result, these type of situations have been created where technology and film come together and they merge and say, hey, if I was to able to give you the best quality stream, the best quality thing, and I'm only going to charge you a small amount of money, would you be able to do it? Would you be able to use this platform? And most people would go for it because it's cheap. And at the same time, whoever is the beneficiary, like for the content creators or the rights holders, will be able to realize the income from their movie.
Yeah. So it's like right now, if you have a bell curve of where the money's being made or where the distribution's happening, it's happening kind of in the meat of that bell curve. But there's these tails where there's a lot of viewers that are just ending up either pirating or watching for free somehow because it's just not, the show's not coming to their area. It seems like such a logical place for blockchain because all it's going to take is an intermediary platform to step in and build the distribution network. Like say, we'll just use Netflix, for example. Something as quality as Netflix comes in, they say, we are a movie chain. We're going to show these new releases. And now I have a movie, all I have to do is go negotiate with movie chain for distribution and they can hit all the tails. And then all those tails, those are just individual viewers and they can come in and buy like they would a movie ticket. Individual.
You get on so many issues here that I want to I'm bursting out of my skin to talk about it because first thing right off the bat, I mean, the studios have the technology available to them. You can, at the moment you go and you purchase that movie ticket, you could set off a blockchain event. It's all coded on your ticket, right? That code on that ticket could at that moment set off the blockchain for all the people that are rights holders, and beneficiaries to that income. But why don't they do it? Because they want to control it. They want to be able to control how much revenue is coming in. They want to be able to gross up expenses. Oh, well, our marketing expenses are this much. So they're able to manipulate the game so much easier when you don't know exactly how much money is going into their coffers. Now, the game changer, of all this, as you said, is to create that platform. Right now, SVOD, SVOD, which is subscription video on demand, the big 8,000-pound gorillas, which we all know who they are, are dominating because not only have they built the platform, Brandon, but they're also creating the content for that platform that they own.
Yeah.
So they're so smart about, doing that because, first of all, they have oodles of cash available to them because the fact of the matter is their stock price is so high, they're able to, borrow against that and be able to, grow through debt. But as long as, that debt is being serviced, they can maintain that growth and they can dominate that industry by signing up all the talent they need to create content for them. So at the end of the day, they own the content, they own the platform. Bingo, you're God. Now, let's see me or you want to create a movie and we can't get on that SVOD platform. What do? We got to think of something that's TVOD, which is transaction video on demand rather than subscription video on demand. And the moment you can create something that is content to consumer, C2C, not B2C, C2C, you got something.
Yeah, I mean
something.
that's
where the game will really shift. Okay, so that's just anyway. These are discussions that I've been having with a lot of people in the industry, and this is how I'm seeing it from my perspective. And once again, I'm an utter neophyte in this whole blockchain world. And what I'm trying to tell you is I'm like a sponge now because it's all coming to me at different angles and having to digest this material and having to be able to explain it in such a way through the experts, because we're all trying to figure it out. Nobody's, the end all be all brain on all this stuff, because if there were, we'd be like a Netflix. You know what I'm saying? We're not.
Yeah. Well, and Netflix took 10 years to build up. They came out of nowhere, but they were working on it forever. Yeah.
And God bless them. I mean, it's incredible what they've been able to achieve. And, at the end of the day, they're putting a lot of people to work. So, I mean, whoever's out there criticizing them, don't criticize them, learn from them. And how can this game become even stronger and better? Because what's the funny thing is that Netflix isn't even worried about their competition at all, SVOD, TVOD, whatever. They're worried about, you know what they're worried about? They're worried about the gamers. Fortnite. That's who they're worried about. Because the amount of money that those gaming, it's astronomical. And that's at some point, they're going to be taking away eyeballs from what the SVOD is, So anyway, so we may be getting sidetracked on all this, but I wanted to kind of maintain, our discussion and keep it fluid so that, we're kind of going in a general direction of where you want it to be.
Yeah, no, it's going. We're going right down the road of EOS glory here. I think that is kind of the heart of what could be a big shift is what you were talking about there. There's so many small things that can happen, all these little pieces that can be tweaked and can help with blockchain. But what everyone's looking for is this: what's going to be the big shift? What's the new change that people that's going to change how we interact? And I really think that it is what you're saying, the TVOD. I haven't heard that term before, but going from SVOD to TVOD it's such a logical progression that just removes so much of the things in between. And as well, it gives the ability for big movie studios and big productions to still operate how they're operating, which is important because they do great things, but then bring the tails into it, which is cool. But then it also gives the opportunity for smaller producers to maybe have independent films that they can distribute much easier. So it helps both ends of the spectrum, it seems like.
Yeah, and once again, just so we can kind of, it's content to computers. Content to consumers. C2C is where you're going to be. You're going to have the game changer.
Mm-hmm.
Game changer is going to be C2C.
Mm-hmm.
Because that way you've completely been able to filter out a lot of the people that are slowing and making this process a lot less efficient. And you're able to also eliminate a lot of unnecessary costs and give the people directly, the content that they want. Content goes straight to the consumer. And TVOD is if it's able to kind of grow, that's how it would grow. And remember that hockey stick effect that I was talking about. But because you have to kind of get to a point where all this talk goes into action, and that action requires what? It requires capital. It requires manpower. Because you can't do this stuff and just rely on technology to take care of everything. Yes, these things got to be coded. Well, that means that they got to be manually input into those computers and created some. But you need the people. For example, one of the examples in this world of TVOD is, if you want to gain traction on your project, that's your content that's out there, you can incentivize your followers, influencers, to push people to buy your content on these TVOD platforms. And you can tokenize that. And you tokenize it and you actually reward them as influencers as a part of the revenue that can come to you in this monetization process through a smart contract. So they can be also a beneficiary, even though they're not a signatory to the original, deal, they can become a beneficiary by simply pushing people to come and bringing eyeballs to that TVOD site to make you want to watch their film.
Yeah,
I'm hoping I'm making sense.
It seems like
am I talking too fast?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. It seems like a easy way to imagine this would be the same way that something like iTunes has revolutionized music, where now there's a lot of smaller artists who just maybe have one or two songs that people want to hear, and people can pay a la carte $1 for a song and download it. The difference being that the next step in that kind of process there is integrating the blockchain so that Apple doesn't even necessarily have to be there to facilitate the transaction. But that direct to consumer is going to be really big.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely something that we're going to have to wait and see. And And you got to understand from my perspective, the way I came about all this stuff, as all filmmakers, as all independent filmmakers do, there's always got to be an event that triggers this for you. And the event is whenever you get screwed yourself in this business enough, when you don't understand certain things and you think you're smart, you've hired the right people, whatever, there's always going to be ultimately some point or aspect of it that only experience and time will illuminate for you. And out of that frustration, last year when I was at the Cannes Film Festival, I could not believe how many blockchain presentations there were. It was my 15th year in Cannes, and I was so amazed at the fact that there were 8 different panels on this technology paradigm shift that ended up at a film festival of that stature, because it's the antithesis of anything that they would want over there. But it's as part of the market. They're like, when you go to Cannes, it's a total bazaar. You've got the film market and you got the festival, and anybody who's schlocking and try to sell anything is trying to get out there and get some kind of exposure. But what was fascinating about this, it was in the front cover, one of the articles of the front cover of Screen Daily, is blockchain the new thing that's going to change this industry? And you would never think that in a million years that they would come up with this kind of stuff, because the talk is out there. People are very nervous. They don't understand it. They try to poo-poo it very quickly because it's not something that is going to make them feel comfortable. Because guess what? There's a lot of middlemen in that business that would lose out. If you digitize and if you tokenize and if you make things, coded and easy that otherwise, would cut out their functionality, think about it. I mean, it's just, just more economical. And so I'm very, very hopeful about it, that from that perspective.
Yeah, it's going to take a few inroads and it'll just kind of start. I mean, it's one of those things that just takes these little baby steps forward and really doesn't take steps back. I mean, we're kind of going, it's a one-way street. Yeah. It's just kind of a matter of if it takes 10 years or there's some sort of precipitating event where something happens quickly. But yeah, so it's just about being right on the forefront of it so you can capture that. What do you think about to me, another big part of this picture is the independent filmmakers. I'm not familiar with that, but it seems that someone wanted to make a film and they need $150,000 to get their great idea out there. But they're having trouble raising money. Isn't there some sort of application for crowdsourcing this money on a smaller level where people are owning parts of the show or the movie, something they like?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, one of the companies that that is speaking at my panel at EFM Horizons this Saturday, February 9th, in Berlin, specializes in that. They're a company called Film Chain Big Couch, and they do crowdsourcing for films using blockchain. And they all actually do it through this other company that they have called Film Big Couch. Sorry, and I maybe I don't want to speak out of line, but they were into crew funding. For example, if you wanted to find a way to get crew onto a film because you can't afford it, well, they would set it up so that the crew could become partial owners of that film. That's and cool. They would give their services. So that you're able to kind of utilize that to get your movie made. So they all become participants in this thing. So that's one source. Of course, there's GoFundMe, there's Indiegogo, there's Kickstarter, there's all these ways to do it. As far as the ICOs are concerned for making movies, I don't know of anyone that's out there personally. I don't know that's been successful in raising funds for a film that. They've done it through ICOs. I just don't know about it. Maybe I just don't know about it.
Yeah, I think
because what I'm saying is right now the traditional model is still the prevalent one, and also we are in such a content explosion with SVOD that now it's everything. It's like it's massive vacuum suck towards SVOD. So if you've got an idea, if you go and pitch it to the SVOD players, and they come in there and they say, "What's your budget for the film?" Let's say it's $10. We'll give you $12. You get to keep the $2 cushion. You make it for 10. There's your profit, but we own everything. I'm just very, back of the envelope accounting it for you, so you kind of understand where this is all being headed. Because at the end of the day, if you're a guy you just want, or a lady who wants to make a film, and they're going to give you the money to make your film, and they're going to stay out of your way to do it. Why wouldn't you do that? And you're going to have distribution around the world.
Yeah, I
it
mean
is
that,
what it is. I mean
that model seems to be, moving really quickly right now. Is it fairly? If with a good idea and a good plan for a movie, it sounds like they're funding that pretty readily with SVOD. Is there people having trouble getting good ideas?
Well, no, it's not that. It's just you gotta have reliable showrunners and producers who've created content before that they can have faith in when it comes to the delivery of the final content. Because at the end of the day, they don't want to invest the money if they don't think you're going to be able to complete it. So they're very, particular about, who the people are that they're going to, sign these deals with. Because at the end of the day, it's like, okay, you got the show idea. I think it's great. You're gonna have that showrunner, that director. You're mini packaging it for them also, but at the same time, for them, it's you got this kind of date to deliver by because we need to have it on on our platform by this time, and we got to make sure that you're going to be able to do it, and that's it. I mean, and in the film world and the television world, it's like television series have a different time, but you have to move much quicker than you do in film. Film, you spend 7 or 8, 9 months to do a 2-hour movie, whereas with TV shows, they got to crank out, like on a TV series that I'm very familiar with, called Madam Secretary, because I know the producer very well. 23 shows in 9 months. That's a lot of content. I mean, you got to think fast. You got to think fast, and you got to be good at it, and you got to understand the ebb and flow of the story and where it's going to go and how it's going to navigate. These kind of things are very, very important when you're thinking about the timeline of, not just what kind of content you want to create, how you want to create it, and how is it going to be seen ultimately by your audience.
Yeah, and with television and movies, I mean, it's both an industry that could have some interesting developments. The idea of the micropayments and paying for what you actually watch is an interesting future as well, where possibly instead of a subscription service that you're talking about, maybe you're paying per minute that you watch, and it just kind of automatically comes out of your account. And so don't accidentally leave your TV on. but yeah, there's some, the micropayments make a really interesting inroad into all this as well.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're creating that content, you want to make sure you can realize the revenue down. Even if it's here's the thing. I mean, for example, Sundance Film Festival just finished, right? I mean, I just want to kind of like make you think about this. And if you were lucky enough to be one of those films in Sundance that was able to get this huge deal through the big SVOD company, endless wallet, companies that have so much money to throw at good films. And wow, so you got there and you make the film got picked up for $10-15 million. That's fantastic. How much of it is actually going to come back to you? Think about it. You've got lawyers, you've got managers, you've got agents, you've got taxes, you've got all that stuff. But at the end of the day, you may only see a small fraction of that money that they're giving you the commitment for, because of the fact that there's so many other middle players involved. Whereas, in the world of John Doe or Jane Doe, who just is desperate to get their film out there, they don't know who to call, who to talk to. They're not connected in the industry, but they have this thing where their technology is going to be able to immediately plug them into a world where they'd never had access to before. That's the beautiful thing. So what? You didn't get onto that, into that big festival. You didn't get all that hype. But guess what? You were able to immediately put out there, if it's good, it becomes viral. And next thing you know, you found a way to monetize it. Yeah.
I mean, again, I think this
for an independent filmmaker, that's the exciting stuff.
For sure. So, I mean, it really reminds me of how the music industry has changed. Like the music that I listen to now is things that I find that are curious, that I find online that sound cool, as opposed to in the past where there was this huge filter on the music industry, and the music that I would hear would have to be filtered through the entire industry. And there's, so I'm getting the 10 that are served up to me. Whereas now online, I have unlimited amount of independent artists, and I'm choosing what sounds good to me. It's a different, removing that filter for the movie industry is a crazy thought.
Yeah. I mean, and as well as I do, I mean, just because you put it out there doesn't mean it's good and it's going to get consumed. But the fact of the matter is, if you have the opportunity to do it, out of those opportunities, more opportunities come about. But also with this content creation explosion with SVOD, at what point does all that merge into what I call YouTubeization? At what point do is it Netflix? Is it Amazon? Is it YouTube? What is it? Because there's so much out there, and how do you go through the process, Brandon, of curating the thing that's right for you? Now the whole C2C will get to a point where that content to consumer will also become a tool where it becomes more refined, where it becomes, wow, I only want to see movies, for example, that have everything to do with historical epics. Like, let's say that's my thing. I don't care about any other kind of movies. I want historical epics. I want my platform to only focus on that. And I want all content to be created. And I want all content to be gathered from wherever source, from the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever, to be only on that subject matter, because I'm a nut about that. Because right now, think about it. You turn on your cable, there's channels for everything right there. Now, just imagine if you were able to only see the kind of channel, and you were able to not just bring an amalgamation of all these things together and to pull them, but also to be able to not just license them, but also be able to monetize it. If you're the creator, you're monetizing it. If you're the platform, you can license the stuff from other places that aren't being used and generate revenue that way, or you can try to be the creator of that and put it on that platform and monetize it that way also. It'd be very curated. In other words, curated content. How do you get to curated content? Because if there's so much out there now, I don't want to see 900 channels. I don't want to end up on channel 762. I just want 1 or 2 or 3 channels. That's it. I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I mean, Netflix does that for you already. I mean, you can scroll and tell you, based on this choice, we recommend this choice, and those algorithms, that AI that's being used for that, that's fascinating. Which brings me to my next one panel discussion after Berlin, which will be strictly on metadata. So if you follow us, all around, you'll see that every single segment that I'm doing on this blockchain technology with these panels will find one aspect of the film industry's needs and challenges and shortcomings when it comes to that industry and how technology can be helpful if it's adopted, and hold.
Yeah, the Netflix algorithm is just, that's their kind of their bread and butter and what let them pull away from everyone else. It seems like some company or some entrepreneurs will step in as far as curating content goes, because the collection of that data and then serving it back to people in a way that makes it the UX really good for them is a huge opportunity. So to your point, that's going to be a big part of the puzzle there, and some tech company doing metadata will probably step in. Maybe Netflix will step in and use their algorithm for it. You never know. Yeah. And that would be a kind of a wild development if Netflix somehow started implementing. They're a fairly forward-looking company, so they may start integrating blockchain. I know that most of the big tech companies out there, IBM is a huge one. They're all really focused on blockchain right now. They're all kind of building as fast as they possibly can behind closed doors to stay relevant. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of the big SVOD companies are also working on that.
And the thing is also, it's already been in place. They just don't talk about it. You know what I'm saying? A lot of it is already being used. It's just not talked about. Mm-hmm. And because right now, whenever you say the word blockchain, it's in you're kind of dealing with the inverted part of the hockey stick.
Yeah.
You're dealing with no, seriously, you're dealing with the negative aspects of blockchain associated with cryptocurrency's downfall. And also the kind of stuff that you hear in the news, like, oh, this guy died and, 190 million bucks of Bitcoin was locked up and nobody can access it. So all of a sudden, like, oh my God, blockchain, cryptocurrency, it's the same thing, blah, blah, blah. But what they don't focus in is the positive aspects. Once you are shifting the bottom of that hockey stick into the position where you can hit the puck, that's where it becomes a much more important discussion and much more relevant to focus on the positive aspects rather than negatives. And once again, it's human nature, right? Are we seeing things as the glass half full, or are we seeing it as half empty?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to, I don't even like mentioning, sometimes I leave blockchain out of my work description, depending on who I'm talking to, because I don't want to deal with all the following questions right now. It's crypto winter has been long. So, yeah, it's rough to mention blockchain. Definitely using the word crypto or cryptocurrency is it's like a bad word right now. So, but the text there, and that $190 million, I actually looked at some of the ledger with some of the transactions there. They have some of that money, previously was going from to other exchanges and to random places. That's a really interesting situation. As far as, that guy dying with $100 million locked up.
But this is what happens. You get news crawl about the negative aspects here, and once 2 or 3 pieces of news that goes viral, and everybody first starts freaking out about it, and they all think that's what it is.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden it's you see, my opinion is now justified because look at the negative news.
Mm-hmm.
But let's not. It's there's so much more positive. It's all about your perspective and how you are able to approach things in anything in life. I don't want to be overly philosophical about it, but it's just what I'm seeing about it. This technology is so pregnant with. It just takes innovative, smart people enough time. Give them enough time, they'll figure out the kinks very quickly because it's useful. And it's something that's necessary, because way too many people out there are getting screwed and not seeing their money come back to them. Mm-hmm. And the gatekeepers who have manipulated this game for the longest time have taken advantage of too many people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's this possibility to unlock some.
I must get a little legal on you. The opinions expressed herein are only mine and not the organization that I represent. So I just want to let you know that this is all my opinion, and I'm thankful that you took the time to have a conversation with me, because I'm doing all these panels around the world and stuff. So it's important that I let you know these are all my opinions and only my opinions.
That's spoken like a true attorney turned filmmaker, now turned blockchain advocate. Yeah, absolutely. These are all my opinions are my own on the EOS podcast as well here, because I say some dangerous things sometimes. So don't give those to anyone else.
You got it.
Yeah. So as far as your next show regarding metadata, what have you heard about how that's going to be used, or what are the initial thoughts on that?
Well, the initial thoughts I'm always curious about it. How in the world is it going to apply to me? You always start off with yourself. Joe Schmo, me. I go to the movie theater and I buy a ticket for Gladiator. Okay, and from that, you get to sense that, okay, said person age, because I've got a movie card or something like that, and I want to make sure I get my points. So they got my date of birth, they've got my, email address, they've got my home address, because they send they have all this information. They know exactly what your likes are. They can start creating, data points, based on that. It's already existing. I'm just letting you know how they're able to use that metadata, for example, in targeting content for that type of person. So whenever, for example, I come up with a movie of that same genre, well, somewhere in some database, there's going to be a list of 1,000 people who like this kind of stuff. And I know the guy's email address. Boom. I'll directly go through some kind of bot, MailChimp or whatever, letting him know that on Brandon's TVOD, you can see Kayvan's film. Metadata.
Yeah. I mean, that's the
tiny example.
Yeah.
Tiny example.
Metadata is kind of like the key to the entire tech universe right now, isn't it? That's almost part of everything we do.
Yeah.
So yeah,
and for all those companies out there, like, you know, the big guys, I mean, it's like a buffet for them. They walk in there, it's like a buffet. They have so much. I mean, they're already they're all, you know, taking, you know, your information and using it in such a way that they're able to target.
Yeah. So metadata, I mean, that's already here. I would say that how blockchain affects metadata is almost an anti-metadata type of use case, because what blockchain will allow us to do is kind of black box our identity, or black box our what we're doing, and then allow us to release the parts of our information that we want. But it allows us in the future to control our identity. So let's say I have my virtual identity on the blockchain, and it's secured with maybe my retina and my, you know, some bio scan that secures it. Now I go and I buy that movie ticket, or I log into a TVOD subscription, and it says, do you want to give your name and address, or do you want to tell how long you were watching, or do you want to tell what you were watching? And blockchain will allow you to keep your identity black boxed, or sure, I'll let them know who I am and what I'm doing, these specific parts only, but in return for something. And then what comes in return? Well, if it's a blockchain, if you're watching through a blockchain, then the advertisers are going to pay you some sort of token, or they're going to pay you and for the value that you're giving through your metadata. So protecting our metadata and then tokenizing it, or getting paid for the value that we're providing to advertisers is where I think that probably fits in with bigger picture with
wow,
the film
industry.
industry.
That's awesome. That's fantastic.
Yeah, so I'm sure that
you just educated me, and I love it, because I did not know that.
Oh, cool.
So that's great. I mean, what I'm saying is, like, you know, once again, I'm like a sponge. I'm trying to absorb all this information, and it's so, you know, and as it's being presented to me, I'm thinking, you know, I'm just trying to connect the dots too. Like, how can I use this? How can I use that? And how can I use it? And how can I not use it? Because that's just it. It's not the solution for everything, but it's a solution for the low hanging fruit stuff that can be automated and used in a certain way. So it's how you get enough smart people in a room to connect those dots for you in such a way that is, you know, palatable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've hit on a few of your talks. You have metadata. You have the one that you already did as far as distribution goes.
It started off was called Transparency Anatomy of a Blockchain Distribution Strategy, which you can find on YouTube easily. And then
that's a great talk. Actually, I watched it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. And then you have the metadata. What else do you have coming up? What other shows do you have coming up?
Well, here's the thing. So the first three are already set in stone, kind of, so to speak. As we progress, we're going to see how because the discussions are very organic and they're very natural. They flow from one thing to another. Mm-hmm. And so I've got enough right now to go through the first three. And then the last three will be dovetailing from the previous three conversations. So you see, every conversation builds on the next conversation. And you know, the first one had so much content in it that it gave us enough of the talk for the next two. So the next ones, you see what I'm saying? So it flows naturally and isn't something that's just so scripted. I like to keep things very freestyle. I like to keep them relevant. And also, if things become stale, I don't want to talk about that anymore. I want to talk about what's, you know, very current. I want to, you know, so by the time you get to the sixth one, you have watched something that is kind of like a baby. It's taken its first steps after a year. On that sixth episode, that sixth segment, you will see that baby walking. Mm-hmm. And hopefully, you know, we can attract the right people so that they say, oh, okay, I know where you're going with all this. What else can you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have the when is the next show, or when is the next panel that people can look for?
The next panel is, yes, it's on February the 9th from 2 to 3 p.m. Central European Time in Berlin during the EFM Horizons. It's in the EFM Horizons section, which is an entire day set up for what's called Blockchain in Motion. And we are the only panel that is doing a talk after a workshop on blockchain applications in the film industry. So it's a fantastic way to kind of end the day on the talks, on the workshops, with a real serious discussion with these companies that are in the forefront of this technology in the film business.
Fantastic. And then what's the third show you have planned?
The third one is right now we're in the embryonic stages of negotiating the venue. It'll be in New York in the third week of April. So I can't tell you exactly where it's going to be until it's solidified and we're able to lock it down. But right now we're eyeballing the third week of April in New York City, and then the Cannes Film Festival that's going to be our big daddy because that's our biggest international event. That'll be in May and the third week of May, and then the last week of August will be the Venice Film Festival, and then the second week of September it'll be the Toronto Film Festival where we wrap it up.
All right. Well, people have a lot to look forward to then. That sounds.
I hope so. I thank you so much. And can I also mention that as a result of all this, I'm going to be doing an emerging media and finance podcast and videocast with Pathbender Media back in Los Angeles. They're based in Sunset Gower Studios in LA, and I'm associated with them on a proprietary fund that is currently past compliance with the global with the global bank. So they develop and manage IP and utilize experienced showrunners for the domestic series of the thing I'm doing. So they're going to be coming on board and helping me expand these talks more and more as we progress. But I would love to do more with you, Brandon, because cool. This was my very first podcast and was the funnest thing I've ever done.
Well, great. This is so go down in EOS podcast lore.
I appreciate the fact that you were so kind to me and so easy with me because I was a little bit nervous about how to do a podcast. I'm still very old school, so I thank you for walking me through this and helping me make it something that was very conversational.
Yeah, absolutely. And we should invite you back on after you've had a few more of your panels and the conversations developed a little bit. I'd love to hear.
Well, let's see if the audience likes it. It all depends on the audience.
We'll see.
If the audience likes it. If the audience doesn't like it, he's out.
All right, we'll let the people speak.
I learned that lesson many years ago.
We'll let the people speak.
We had 4 viewers. We had 4 viewers and 2 of them fell asleep.
Yeah, for sure. We'll let the viewers speak. So that's we're wrapping up here in my EOS podcast, friends. I will put links for anything that you for possibly your other podcast that you going to go on there, Kayvan, and also for the YouTube of the initial panel that you had. I'll share. Because
the great thing is if people watch the YouTube video that I did that starts off this entire discussion, it will become a lot more easily understandable that we're regarding how I view this, and it's a great preamble for this discussion.
Absolutely. Well, until next time I use podcast, friends, remember there's a podcast version also. It's not just our beautiful faces on YouTube here or yours and my
all right.
my shiny head and my funny hat. The podcast version is so people can listen at work and pretend like they're working, but actually learn about EOS and blockchain technology. So,
thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. And cheers, my EOS friends.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Have a lovely day.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
The money is not the prime asset in life. Time is, and your time is.